has went by. And now you're seeing Christmas decorations. Some of you have gotten the Christmas decorations out. You've already put them up. Some of you maybe aren't into that, but you can look out and see your neighbor's Christmas decorations that are up. And if you're like me, you're thinking, I just saw that. Before you know it, hours become days, days become weeks, weeks become months, and then years, and all of a sudden you come to a time where it's like a lifetime has passed, and it seems like it passed in a matter of just a few moments. Everything races by, and then it's beyond. Yeah, and you think to yourself, like, I think to myself sometimes, like, how did I get here? How did this happen? Why am I where I am at today? Emotionally, relationally, socially, physically, spiritually, mentally, all of those things. Like, why am I here? How did I get here? In a snap of a finger, in a blink of an eye. Let me tell you, a lot can happen in a short period of time. And a lot more can happen in a longer period of time, even if it seems like it went by in a short period of time. A lot can happen. And sometimes that stuff that happens is just life happens. Things happen. Some things happen just because they happen. And there's other things that happen because over the course of time, there's a lot of choices that are made. There's a lot of decisions that are made. There's a lot that goes into how we got here. How we are where we are. For the nation of Israel, time was flying by. Like it was racing by. And at the end of every generation, they were able to look back upon their time and say, how did we get here? More times than not, it was one of those shocking horrors of how did we get here and how are we passing this on to the next generation? Like we are so far removed from God, how did we get here? And they'd have to begin answering to themselves, there's sometimes where just life happened. But for them, more times than not, it was the decisions. It was the choices. It was stuff that was within their control that they just mishandled. Or it was stuff that they didn't know, but they could know if they just wanted to know. If they opened up their ears physically and spiritually, there was help that was available to them to make the right choices, to make the right decisions. But so many of them lived without instruction, lived without guidance, and lived without counsel. And that's why they got to where they were. Generation after generation after generation. You fast forward to 2021, and sometimes that's why we are where we are. Not because life just ceases to happen or all the perceived bad no longer takes place, but just because we make a lot of choices. We make a lot of decisions on a daily basis. It's interesting, 700 years before the birth of Jesus, God spoke these words through the prophet Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 9, verse number 6, the initial hearers and readers of this, they were reading this and hearing this, and they were thinking of in anticipation of what was yet to come. But it was something awesome that they were told, this is on its way. Now we read this, and we don't look forward to anticipation, but we look back at something that had already been lived out. Isaiah chapter 9, verse number 6, for unto us a child is born. Now born to who? Born to us. Everyone say us. This child is born to us. A son is given to who? To us. It's okay to say us when the Bible uses the word us there, okay? It's not you being super selfish right now. It's just you reading Scripture. A son is given to us. Now, the government will rest on his shoulders. Like he's the authority figure in this thing. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor. Everyone say Wonderful Counselor. That's his name. He'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. The passionate commitment of the Lord of heaven's armies will make this happen. All of those names that we just read, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, the one who the government and his peace, his government, his peace will never end, and it'll rest on his shoulders. talking about Jesus. Now everyone again, say the name Jesus. We're going to study these names over the next 4 weeks. First one that we're going to look at, it's this reality of this Christ child, the reality of this one who is given to us, Jesus. He is the wonderful counselor. That's his name. His name is Wonderful Counselor, but it's not just his name, it's also a description of who he is. Jesus is Wonderful Counselor, and he is a wonderful counselor. Some of you may be reading from a translation that separates these two words, and they call Jesus Wonderful and Counselor as compared to Wonderful Counselor. And he is wonderful, and he is a counselor, but most theologians, historians, and scholars alike are in agreement, and a study of the Hebrew language makes it evident that these two names aren't meant to be separated. In fact, it's one word describing who he is in another word. He is Wonderful Counselor. So even though he's wonderful, and even though he is a counselor, there's something significant about God saying he is Wonderful Counselor. Because that's the type of counselor he is. And that's the type of counsel he gives. Now, if we look up the word wonderful in an English dictionary, you'll probably see it defined as something like inspiring delight. That's what's wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful. The weather's wonderful. That cake was wonderful. It's just wonderful how things have turned out, like inspiring delight or something that's extremely good. But neither of those definitions do justice to what this word in the Hebrew, wonderful, and we get the word wonderful, what it comes from. The word is pela, and it means something uncommon. Something uncommon, something astonishing, incomprehensible. That's the type of counselor he is. Like, you can't even comprehend it. So it'd be like, eating that piece of cake where, oh, that's wonderful. It's where you ate a piece of cake and it blew your mind. Like you've never had anything like that before, or a day where the weather, it's like I've never seen such a beautiful day. When it comes to Jesus being a counselor, it's one of those where I've never experienced anything like this before. And those people who don't know Jesus, I don't even know how to explain exactly what it is that he can do for you, because it's blown my mind, or out of this world. It's like where good and great is right here, Jesus is a notch above. The best that you can ever imagine. In this case, counsel. Hey, Jesus is a notch above that. And I just want to ask you just real quickly, do you view him as that type of a counselor? Do you view Jesus' counsel as that? That it's just a notch above. Whatever the world could offer, whatever the greatest, most well-known counselor in this world, whatever they could provide for me, hey, Jesus is a notch above that. That's how good he is. And that's how good he is at what he does. Now, the word counselor there in the Hebrew comes from the word yohetz. Now, today, we would think of a counselor, and we usually picture someone who's sitting across the room from us, and we're sitting in a chair, and they're sitting in a chair, and they're asking questions like, so how does that make you feel? Those types of things, or, tell me more about that. And their aim is to just to hear from you, to take a bunch of notes. And then after a session, they say, I'll see you next week. Like, that's what we normally think of when we think today of a counselor. But it's very interesting to note that up until the late 19th century, early 20th century, and before the introduction of modern psychology with the likes of Sigmund Freud and people like that, the thought of a counselor, the thought of counsel, the thought of counseling, it was nothing like that. It wasn't where you would hear that word and you would automatically think, oh, yeah, that's the type of person who you got an hour of their time and they sit down there and they take notes and they try to get to know that, that inner child, or they get to know that those hurts or the stuff that had happened way back when, to try to unpack certain things. for years, for centuries, for generations. I'm talking like thousands of years. When people would see this word counselor, they would think something far different. They wouldn't think of a therapist. They would think of a strategist. That's what a counselor was. Someone who was strategic. Someone who would strategize. Someone who would give people counsel or advice on things like, how do you win this campaign? Looking forward. King, you're going out to war. Here's how you win that war. Here's how you live out a successful life. Here's how you organize certain things. Here's how you look forward to what's yet to come. So they didn't set out to study a patient's inner hurts or a patient's inner child. They would advise, whether it be a king or whether it be a common folk, how to set course for the rest of your life. How do you aim for what's coming forward? How do you face what needs to be faced looking forward? All of that to say there's nothing wrong with modern counseling as long as it's like biblically based counseling, where you look up and you look forward more than you constantly look behind, where you recognize and you realize that God is still on the throne, and if you're here, there's still life to be lived. So look forward, look up, look at what's yet to come. You got to process certain things, no doubt about it. All of us, we've got things that we have to process. But there's something about forgetting all that just passed and pressing forward to what is yet to come. There's something, the ability to recognize that there are certain things that are eternal. Even in this life that's temporal, there's eternal things. There's things that are spiritual, even in this life that is physical. Yohat, counselor, to give advice, to guide. That's the type of counselor Jesus is. Now, undoubtedly, he will listen to you, and he'll spend time with you, and he cares about your hurts. He cares about the stuff that you're going through. But he's also a strategist. He's also one who it's about looking forward. It's about recognizing that nothing takes him by surprise, recognizing that he will guide you into a life that's overflowing, that he will guide you into a place where you have joy that's unspeakable. Because everything that's speaking to you is saying you shouldn't have joy, but yet he's a wonderful counselor. He's a notch above. It's one of those where it's unspeakable. The peace that he gives is incomprehensible. He's a wonderful counselor. And you and I need that. First thing that we're going to uncover here in this part one of a series that's going to be called Prince of Peace, but part one is emphasizing this idea of a wonderful counselor, is we need to look and we need to see and we need to understand that there is a need for counsel. And we're going to quickly look at 5 reasons that Scripture reveals to us our need for counsel. Now, you don't have to turn to these verses if you don't want to. They'll all appear on the screen. But the first verse that we're going to look at, it gives us some words that Jesus spoke to his disciples. He shared with them shortly before his arrest, trial, crucifixion. And these words are as true today as they were when he first spoke them. Notice in John 16:33, Jesus says this, "Here on earth." Raise your hand if you're still here on this earth. All right? So he's talking about us who are still here on this earth. Here on this earth, you'll have certain things. Understand. And some of those things are going to be great, and some of those things are going to seem easy, and some of those things are going to, just by looking at them, you're going to be able to say, they're good. But there's also certain things that you'll have, including what? Many trials. Here on this earth. Number 1 on your outline, everyone is going to have issues that need to be dealt with. Sometimes these issues are problems that need to be solved. Sometimes they're questions that need answered. Sometimes they're doubts that need reassurance. Sometimes they're circumstances that are out of our control, or situations at times that we've sinned ourselves into. What do you do with that? Do you just ignore that? You just struggle through it and put on the happy face and just like, oh, I grit my teeth and I just, How do you get counsel? A few other problems we're going to quickly consider. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 22. Proverb says this: plans go wrong for lack of advice, or you could say lack of counsel. Many advisors, many counselors bring success. And the reason for that is, number two, everyone needs to hear things that need to be understood. Everyone needs help in the strategizing. Everyone needs help in the planning. But all of that begins with gaining knowledge. There's things we do not yet know that we need to know. And that knowledge doesn't come from inside yourself, where it's just in and of yourself. Where every day, I don't know, I just like knowledge is growing inside of me. Like I'm not like trying to get knowledge. I'm not trying to gain knowledge. I'm just that type of person where I don't know. Like apparently, inside my soul is fertile soil for knowledge to be grown. That's not how it works. There has to be some knowledge that comes from someone, that comes from something, that comes from somewhere. And it's not just you in and of yourself. And building upon the knowledge, everyone needs guidance. Everyone needs instruction. Everyone needs wisdom. Everyone needs to hear things that need to be understood. Think about the most basic of things. How many of you like math, arithmetic? One of you, two of you, three of you. There we go. 4, 5. Wow, 6, 7, 8. Okay. There's some of you that like math. I'm not one of those. But some of the most basic things, even when it comes to arithmetic, how did you find out 2 + 2 = 4? Was there just that one day where all of a sudden, like inside of you, it's like, oh, well, problem solved. I've always wondered what 2 + 2 equaled. You probably never even thought about it until somebody taught you, hey, you take these 2 blocks and these 2 blocks. How many blocks do you get now? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I've got some new knowledge. 2 + 2 = 4. And that's useful knowledge because eventually you'd go to school and you'd be tested on that knowledge. You would experience a test. And if you didn't know the answer to that problem, the solution to that problem, that test would quickly become a trial. You fast forward from 2 + 2 = 4, and you get into some more advanced things, and you probably can go back to those of you who are in school right now. You probably don't have to go back very far. Those of us who have been out of school for some years, you go back to when you were in school, and you probably have some of these memories where you took a test and you were prepared for it. It was like smooth sailing. Okay, that's behind me. But then you take those tests that you're not prepared for. You don't have the knowledge that you need. And those problems become huge, insurmountable problems. Because I don't know what this is. Here is a problem. Here is a question that I don't know the answer for. But right now is the time I needed to know the answer. And I don't know it. Everyone needs to hear things that need to be understood. But when do you hear those things? Unfortunately, we wait till it's a little too late because we've already faced the trial, we've already faced the heartache, we've already faced the hardship, and we were not prepared for it. Other times, there's that preparation that takes place, whereas as a believer, for us, we're just always trying to grow in this knowledge. We all have heard things in our past where I should say, we've all heard things in our past where there comes a time where you experience something and you find out that, wow, I was prepared for that something. Now again, there's some times where things just, it's like they come out of left field. Like, how did that happen? But even while going through that, it's amazing to think about how sometimes it's just, wow, I was being prepared even when I didn't realize I was being prepared. I was being taught things that I didn't realize was one day going to show up on a test. I didn't realize that there was going to be this trial that comes after a time of preparation. I think back, on myself, in life. And I think about some of the trials, and some of you got trials that you went through, you've got seasons of life that you went through that make mine, that I'm even thinking of right now, just minuscule, small. Some of you went through a lot. Some of you are going through a lot. But I want you to know that when it comes to the questions, when it comes to certain problems being solved, there is an opportunity for counsel, but the first thing that we have to do is we have to understand that you and I don't know everything we need to know. You don't. Every one of us need to come to that point where it's just that humility. Like, I'm in a process, I'm progressing, but I need to open up my ears. I need to open up my ears. I need to hear the counsel. I need to heed the counsel. Everyone needs it. Another couple Proverbs, just real quickly. Proverbs 24, verse number 5. The wise are mightier than the strong, and those with knowledge grow stronger and stronger. Verse 6. So don't go to war without wise guidance. I don't know of any of us who are preparing for war other than the spiritual war that we're in. But we could say, don't set out to do anything, especially anything significant, without wise guidance, without wise counsel. Don't go to war without wise guidance, because victory or success depends upon having many advisors. Each of us have to get the counsel, but in so doing, we have to remember that not all counsel is good counsel. There's a reason that it needs to be wise guidance, a reason it needs to be wise counsel. And we need the counsel that comes from people that we know are desiring our victories in life, our successes in life, people who we know they have a vested interest in us. And they have a vested interest in our being successful in this journey called life, and especially in this Christian journey, in this journey of being a Christ follower. The Proverb 28, verse 26. Those who trust their own insight, those who say, I don't need counsel. And there's some that are like that. Bible will tell you what those people are. What are they? They're foolish. Those who say, I already know it all. I know everything I need to know. I know this is what I need to do while I do this, or while I try to attain that, or while I set out on this journey. Those who trust their own insight are foolish, but anyone who walks in wisdom is safe. Contextually, those who get counsel and those who live according to wise counsel, you're safe. And there's something reassuring about knowing, hey, I'm safe. I don't know how this thing's going to turn out, but I'm getting the counsel, and I know I'm going to be safe. Here's a need. Everyone needs, fourthly, a perspective outside their own. Because many times, we as people, we can be blinded by our own ignorance. But we can also be blinded by our own feelings or our own desires. Some of us, we think we know it all, so we don't know what we don't know. So we don't think there's anything that we don't know. We're ignorant of the fact that there's something you need to hear. There's something you need to understand. There's some guidance that needs to be given in this. There's some instruction that needs to be had. Sometimes it's feelings that'll blind us. Because you went through something, or you're facing something, or there's a fear of what's yet to come, so there's feelings involved. And our feelings can blind us. And at times as well, the desires of I want this. Whatever this is, I want this. And I'll achieve this. And I'll grab a hold of this, or I'll overcome this, and I'm going to grab a hold of that, and everything's going to be good, so I'm just going to do it. You need a perspective outside of your own. We're taking a break from our study in Hebrews, but that's what the writer of Hebrews, when he was instructing those within the church, he was giving them a perspective outside of their own. Because for some of them, their desires and their feelings were just saying, go back to where it was a whole lot easier than what it is now. But there was somebody who had a perspective outside of that and said, oh, you have no idea what you're going to be walking into. The last need, everyone needs someone at any given time. Humanly speaking, we're not meant to do this life alone. We need other human beings. Now, with all of these things in mind, I want us to consider that being a human being brings with it certain experiences that take counsel that's beyond human. Consider that for a moment. Being a human being will bring with it certain experiences that will require a counsel that's beyond human. I mean, how do we counsel a soul when we barely understand the soul? How do we counsel a spirit, a spirit that exists within us as human beings? How do we counsel when the spirit is such a mysterious thing? And spiritual things, it's just it's beyond my understanding. It's beyond my knowledge. How do we counsel for a future that we've yet to live? It's unknown to us. How do you and I provide wonderful counsel to someone when we don't know what their future may bring? Because that's biblical counsel. That's looking forward. That's strategizing for something yet to come. That's desiring success for tomorrow when we're living in today. It's not a constant you going back and working through things. Again, there's times where that is a necessary step to take, where stuff has to be processed, but we're talking about wonderful counsel of the future, of things yet to come, of preparing us, of equipping us. How do we do that as mere human beings? In and of ourselves, we can't. We would be horrible at it. And in turn, there's often times where even within a church, we are horrible at providing counsel. Because we'll grab more of what the world has to say while ignoring what God has to say. We'll listen to the brilliant minds of yesterday while ignoring the wonderful counselor that's still here today. Young shepherd boy named David is out tending to his father's sheep, and he wrote a psalm. I want us to read quickly through Psalm chapter 139. And I want us to consider this aspect of some things are just beyond human. Sometimes we need to go to someone whose understanding is far greater than ours, perspective far greater than ours, somebody who knows each and every one of us better than we could even know ourselves. So the young shepherd boy is sitting there and he's writing this psalm out as he's just amazed as he's considering the greatness of God. Oh Lord, you have examined my heart and know everything about me. How much does he know about you? Everything. How much does he know about me? Everything. You know when I sit down. You know when I stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest ocean, even there, your hand will guide me, and your strength will support me. Brothers and sisters, that's counsel. Look to verse number 13. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so, notice this, wonderfully complex. So he's quite familiar with the fact that we are complex people. I'm complex. I don't get me. I don't understand me sometimes. And God knows that. And he made us with this complexity that we'll never be able to fully grasp as mere humans. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. Look to verse 16. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. I don't know about you, but that sounds like God knows how things should go. He's got it all planned out, but don't let that scare you. Don't let that intimidate you. Because notice verse 17, how precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you're still with me. Look down at verse 23. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me. Everyone say, test me. Test me. David's saying, just you test me and know my anxious thoughts. So you search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Am I ready for this? Am I prepared for this? Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path of everlasting life. Quick question. Can we follow God's lead if our entire lives we spend looking back? Biblical counsel, wonderful counsel. You got to look forward. Because there's someone who's guiding you into life. There's still life yet to be lived. As you look throughout that psalm, it sounds like a counselor is pretty wonderful. It's the supply of counsel that comes along with having a relationship with Jesus Christ. And just by way of the name Wonderful Counselor, we know certain things about the supply of counsel that's given to Jesus Christ. A supply that David understood, but many at that time didn't. The supply that we can understand, but yet many don't even today. Number one in your outline, supply of counsel. Jesus is the one who counsels with purpose and action. Just by way of understanding the meaning of the name, and we won't rehash that, but there is purpose and there is action. And when it comes to Jesus being able to download what we need to know today, he knows all. He knows the whole counsel of God because he is God. Number two on your outline, Jesus being fully God, he knows all and reveals what needs to be known. And he's one that can be trusted. He's never let me down. He's never let you down. Even when we think he has, he won't let you down. He can't let you down. He can be trusted, but I love this thought. He also has an eternal perspective. Because remember, the need for counsel, we need to have perspective outside of our own because sometimes we are blinded by our own ignorance. Sometimes we are blinded by our feelings. Sometimes we're blinded by our desires. Jesus isn't blinded by any of that. He has a perspective outside of our perspective, and it's eternal. Like, just think about that for a moment. Jesus sees our tomorrow and can help us strategize for it today. Get that. He knows your tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. He knows the rest of our lives and how it's mapped out and how it should be lived out. And he helps you strategize for that today. He's not a mean Savior and he's not a mean Lord. And God's not some mean God who says, hey, I will send you the test. I will give you the test. And it'll come out of nowhere and you will not be prepared for it. Even the stuff that seems to come out of nowhere, God is so good and He is so faithful that He will make sure to it that if we're seeking Him, if we're growing in our knowledge, if we're growing in this relationship with Jesus Christ, He will be sure to it that we are prepared, even when that test is a trial. Even when that test will result in sorrow. You'll find yourself prepared. Again, I look back at my own life. And again, some of the things that I've went small compared to some of the things that some of you have gone through. But I hope that you can look back upon your life. And if you were in a season of your life where you were focusing in on Jesus Christ and you were growing in your relationship, I hope you can look back and see where, God, you were good even when things seemed so bad. God, you had helped grow me, mature me. You had helped me in this thing. Because out of nowhere came something. Now, I can look back again on my life. I hope you can look back on yours, but let's not take each other's experiences as gospel truth. Let's look to the Gospels, the gospel truth, and see that number 4 in your outline, Jesus is a proven, wonderful Counselor. Rounding third, heading for home. Luke chapter 8. We're going to begin in verse 38. We're going to go through a rapid series of events where this wonderful Counselor is providing counsel that's a notch above. That's the type of counsel that he gives. But in these passages, in these verses we're going to look at, the counsel that he gives is oftentimes overlooked because of the miracles that take place within this chapter. And a lot of times it's the miracle that takes place that kind of grabs our attention, and you hear sermons preached upon the miracles that took place more so than you do upon the counsel that you see. Even some of the most brief exchanges. Just the counsel that's in that. Where we're at here in Luke chapter 8 is we're a couple years into Jesus' earthly ministry. And one of the most amazing things had just happened. A man who had been terrorized by demons for years had just experienced victory and freedom by way of Jesus Christ. And in the moments immediately following this new lease on life, the man is trying to wrap his mind around all of this, and he's trying to process his emotions. And notice in verse number 38, the man who had been freed from the demons begged to go with him, begged to go with Jesus. Now, more than likely, this man understood that Jesus changed everything, so maybe he felt like he owed Jesus this debt of gratitude, like, hey, I'll come along with you, and I will carry your bags, and I will shine your sandals, and I will run errands for you, I will run the security, I'll do whatever, because let me tell you, you changed my life, and I'm going to go with you in this, and I'm going to serve you, and I'm going to be right there beside you. Or maybe he just wanted to be close to Jesus because of what Jesus had just done and think, man, if I ever find myself in another situation, I want to be right beside this guy. Either way, many ordinary teachers, preachers, leaders, counselors would think, yeah, the extra hands would be nice. You come along, yeah, absolutely. I come, and sometimes those bags get heavy. Sometimes my sandals get dirty. Sometimes people out there in the crowd, they can scare me a little. Not that Jesus is ever fearful. I'm just saying, many people today, it's like, I got something for you to do. Yeah, there's a list a mile long. I would love to just grab a hold of you, and, you do that. But Jesus, he's a wonderful counselor. He gives uncommon counsel. He gives counsel that's a notch above. Jesus sent him home. He's like, I'll go with you. I want to go with you. And Jesus, he sent him home saying, no, go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you. Translated, don't spend all of your time telling people you don't know about me. Spend your time telling the people you do know about me. And now you've got a testimony to take with you. Your family needs to hear. Those around you need to hear. They knew your story. They knew that you were that wild, crazy man, possessed by all these demons. And now you got a story to go home and say, look what, I'm changed, and it's all because of Jesus. Now, For some, we're called to leave our homes. For some, they're called to leave everything that's familiar. They're called to travel to the mission fields. But this man was called to go home and make the home his mission field. So he went all through the town proclaiming the great things Jesus had done for him. And right here we see that Jesus uses both the broad brush and the fine points. What do I mean by that? Glad I asked myself that question. There are times that we need the broad brush. There's times that we need the reminders of what it's all about. And there are other times we need the fine points. We each have a specific journey that needs to be lived out. So understand that for this man, it was all about Jesus. Jesus changed everything for you. That is the message that you have. That's what made all things new. He's the one who gave you life. He's the one who freed you. He's the one through whom you found victory. So wherever you go, you tell him, or you tell people about Jesus. But for you, you're going home. You're going to your physical home. For Peter, it's one of those where, hey, you leave everything behind you and you follow me. James and John, it was, hey, you leave all of that behind you. You leave your family. You leave all of that behind you. And you follow me. So the broad brush, the type of counselor that Jesus is, he will change things for the good. And that's for everyone. But never forget that the type of counsel he gives, broad brush and the fine point. Because he has a specific plan for each and every one of us. Continuing on, verse 40, on the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they'd been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, or you would say this would be a mature man of the faith. He came and he fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. Imagine being in Jairus' situation right here. His daughter, his only daughter, is sick. She's dying. His pride and joy. Now, he's a man of status. He's a man of authority. He's a leader. And people are watching him. They're watching him to see how he handles the situation. They're watching to see how he handles everything in life, especially even this test, even this trial, even this time of sorrow. Now, he's done something great here. We see that he's gone to Jesus. But he's also a man who understands right now time is of the essence. In his mind, there can't be a delay here. His daughter is sick. His daughter is dying. His daughter needs a miracle. So Jesus, you got to come with me right now. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. Now, I'm sure each of us understand that walking through crowds takes a little more time than walking freely. So here, Jesus, he's being delayed. If you're Jairus, you're probably trying to keep people away. Stay away from this man. He's got some place to go. There's something far more important than him just looking and greeting and meeting all of you right now. It's not a meet and greet session. I've got a daughter who needs a miracle. But in this crowd, there was also this woman. Verse 43. She had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. And she could find no cure. She couldn't find an answer. She couldn't find a solution. Why do you suppose she's in the crowd here? She's in hopes of a miracle. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. So she got her miracle, and that's awesome. But unfortunately, oftentimes, that's the sole focus of an application and a reading or a hearing of the story. There's so much more. Verse 45, who touched me? Jesus asked. Now, remember, there's this spiritual leader named Jairus who's still present, probably thinking to himself, okay, The crowds are slowing you up enough. Now there's no time for small talk and conversation. My daughter needs a miracle. It's like, hurry, Jesus, hurry. But Jesus wasn't in a hurry. And he wasn't going to be rushed. He's going to have a conversation with someone who needs a conversation, just like a wonderful counselor would. We're going to find out here in just a moment that's not a bad thing. Sometimes we get so consumed with just I just need that physical touch. I just need that something physical. I just need something in this material world. Just do this for me. I need this temporal supply. I need that. But God, he knows what we need. He knows the eternal things that we need. Jesus has a perspective beyond just that this woman needs the bleeding to stop, or that Jairus has a daughter at home. He's having a conversation with this woman. Continuing on in verse 45, Jesus asked, who touched him, and everyone denied it. And Peter said, Master, the whole crowd is pressing up against you. So Peter's thinking, there's no way to know. There's no way to answer this question of who touched you. The person who touched you might not even know who touched you. I mean, look at the crowd around here. But Jesus said, someone deliberately touched me, for I felt healing power go out from me. So Jesus knows there's someone there who has sought him out. And he knows this person needs more than just a physical touch, because they already got their physical touch. He knows there's more to it than that. All the while, Jairus is probably struggling with a whole whirlwind of emotion because of his daughter's situation and the passing of time. When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had immediately been healed. I love verse 48, and it's the reason that Jesus stopped to have this conversation. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Everyone say peace. The more one understands God's word cover to cover, the more one understands the working of God's will. There are times when God wills the healing, and there's times when God wills the enduring. Here was a time that God willed the healing, and this woman's faith played a role in that. But understand, her faith wasn't placed in faith. Her faith was placed in Jesus. And that is so key to understand. Her faith wasn't placed in her ability just to kind of go that extra step and just, man, if I've just got the faith to press through that crowd. Her faith was placed in Jesus. He alone is the one who can heal. It's Jesus who made her well. The same way Jesus can make one well even if they're healed or even if they're called to endure. He can make one well. And whether you're healed, whether you have to endure, whether your loved one's healed, whether your loved one's called to endure, there's a promise that all can cling to, and that is the promise of peace. As we'll talk in a few weeks, Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Before he ascends into heaven, he tells us, I'm leaving you with this peace. The world can't give you this peace, but I can give you this peace. And the woman needed to hear those words. Go in peace. You see, because for years, she had no peace. And I believe, had she received the healing we read about here, without the words that Jesus spoke to her, she would have been physically touched, but she would have had no peace in her life. She would have had her healing, but she would have lived the rest of her life just with unrest. Because there would have been stuff in her mind, in her emotion. There would have been, just wounds, deep wounds that she would have never been able to get past. But Jesus is the solution to those problems. Jesus looks directly to her and says, daughter. That's like love. That's a vested interest. That is a wonderful counselor who's now got her attention. He's the authority. Remember, the government rests on his shoulders. He's the authority figure. And he says, go in peace. how could she go in peace if all of that stuff for years has been, happening to her? She's got all of that stuff, being that outcast, being that one mocked, that one ridiculed. How could she ever have peace? Because Jesus said, go in peace. The reason is because Jesus said so. That's the reason. And that woman needed to hear Jesus say so. Go in peace. So for her, there's this lasting peace that's been given to her, not because of the changing of circumstances. And so oftentimes, that's the focus of this story. Look at that, the healing happened. By golly, and that could be yours. That's why a lot of believers live their life without peace. It's not the changing of circumstances that bring peace. Peace comes from Christ. That's where you have peace. And I hope you understand that. Jesus is so very good. See on your outline, he gives spiritual counsel for the soul. He will tell you and he will tell me what we need to hear. Let's cut back to Jairus. Now he has to be at a place where he's overcome with worry. Just think about what he's facing. Now it seems like Jesus' attention has solely been turned to that woman. And not only her physical need that's been met, but now Jesus is ministering to her soul. And Jairus needs Jesus to go home with him because his daughter is sick and dying and time is running out. And in verse 49, his biggest fears realized while he, Jesus, was still speaking to this woman. A messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, and told him, your daughter is dead. No use troubling the teacher now. Jairus has just seen Jesus. He had Jesus' focus. He had Jesus' attention. They even began a journey walking home. He engaged in conversation with this wonderful counselor, but now his daughter is dead. So what's this counselor going to do now? Well, an average counselor would probably go straight into comforting this person with their circumstance. Oh, Jairus, I'm so sorry. I wish there was something that I could have done. Sorry. But Jesus is no average counselor. When Jesus heard what had happened, he said to Jairus, don't be afraid. Notice that ministering to the soul. Don't be afraid. Just have faith. He's ministering the soul and he's talking spiritual talk. And again, this isn't a faith in faith. Jesus is saying, have faith in me and she will be healed. Here, Jesus reveals the will of God being that this girl would be raised from the dead. Now, understand, this isn't the normative thing that happens, but even during this time, and even during the time of Jesus walking the earth, it wasn't the normative thing for a child or an adult or no matter the age for them to die and being raised from the dead. The normative thing was just it's appointed unto man wants to die, and you just that's what had happened. But here, this thing that's not normative is taking place, is going to take place. Jesus is working according to the will of the Father, the same way that he'll work according to the will of the Father when the normative thing takes place. When there's grief and there's sorrow that has to be that has to be processed, where there's a pressing on that has to take place. Regardless of which it is, you got to get Christ in the circumstance. So take heart in the fact that we can get Christ in the circumstance. When they arrived at the house, Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in with him, verse 51, except Peter, John, and James, and the little girl's father and mother. The house was filled with people weeping and wailing, but he said, stop the weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep. Now there's some counsel, but what would you say or what would you think to yourself if you're in that room and you heard someone give that sort of counsel? Yeah, that's crazy. Who let this guy in the house? That's what he has to say? Who recommended this guy? Jairus, you walked to go get him? Verse 53, the crowd laughed at him. because they all knew she had died. So they laughed it off because they thought they had an understanding of the situation, an understanding of the circumstance that was greater than Jesus' understanding of the situation and circumstance. And many times people still today think the same thing. But I know because I can see. And the whole while you're just ignorant to the fact that you're blind. I know because I can feel. All the while you're ignorant because you're basing it all on your feelings. I know what I want. All the while you're ignorant and you're blinded because of that, in that case, just your desires. And for that crowd in that room, they're looking at Jesus and it's like just laughing at him. The wonderful counselor whose counsel is always a notch above. Verse 54, then Jesus took her by the hand and said in a loud voice, "My child, get up!" And at that moment, her life returned and she immediately stood up. At which point, Jesus took a bow and said, "That's why you all shouldn't have been laughing at me." And, he went on his way and no. That's what I would have done. That's what I would have said, but Jesus is a notch above. Immediately after that happens, this far greater counselor, here's what he did. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Again, much like the broad brush and the fine points, he has compassion and concern for that which may seem big as well as for that which may seem small. He gave her life, but he was also concerned about her having something to eat. That's my wonderful counselor. That's your wonderful counselor. That's the one who has been given to us. For so many average counselors, this young girl's physical hunger would probably have been the last thing on their mind because of the awesome miracle that raised her to life. Like we solved the problem. We have the solution. All right, moving on to the next one. That's not how Jesus operates. He's concerned about the big things. He's concerned about the small. Verse 56, her parents were overwhelmed. But Jesus insisted they not tell anyone what had happened. Broad brush, fine detail. For some, you come and you follow wherever Jesus, I'm talking Jesus' physical journey. I'm calling you, I'm changing your life, now you follow me close. For others, hey, I've changed your life, I've changed the course of your life, I've changed the circumstances within your life, I've given you something spiritual, go home and tell everyone. And then in this case, it just was a fine point, just was a different. And that's why it's so important for us to be in tune, spiritually in tune with the one who paints with the broad brush, but also the fine details of Matt Smith's life, of your life. For a believer, I love closing comfort and challenge would come from this verse. Isaiah chapter 7 and verse number 14. Prophet Isaiah again delivering a message concerning the coming Christ child. All right, then the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. There's a fifth thing that we need to know when it comes to the supply of this counsel, and that is this: Jesus is always close. I want you to be comforted by that reality. Like, find comfort in that. Jesus is always close. 24/7. That's the type of counselor he is. He's a 24/7 counselor. He's with us all the time. And he never has to be in a hurry. So don't be afraid. He cannot be rushed, so don't try to rush him. Instead, just trust in him. Trust in him being the wonderful counselor that he is. That one with uncommon counsel. A notch above. And there's no notches above his. It's top notch. And the counsel that he gives, you might say, so where do I get that from? the written word that Jesus gives life to. From Genesis all the way through Revelation, it points to Jesus Christ, the wonderful counselor. Get your counsel from his word. Get your counsel from the Holy Spirit that Jesus had sent. The one who guides you. He guides you into all truth. That truth that sets you free. That truth that sets the course. That truth that shows you what that next step is. That next step is. That light that comes by way of the Holy Spirit illuminating God's word. But you also can get that wonderful counsel by way of the body of Christ. That is, when the body of Christ centers herself upon Jesus Christ. So that you can look at people and you can say, I can trust that individual, because the counsel that they give is not going to be counsel of their own. And it's not going to be the world's counsel. It's going to be counsel that comes from the wonderful counselor. The one who's never reactive. It's never that, he looks at us and says, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming for you. I didn't know you were going to go through that. Now let me try to shuffle everything around. But he's faithful in preparing us for certain things. And even when we fail the test, he's one who maintains a closeness with us. It's like he puts his spiritual arms around us and says, we'll still get through this. And we'll still get through this together. But I want you to accept this challenge. Be comforted by all those things. Accept the challenge of getting counsel, of living according to the counsel, and living because of the counsel.